Welcome from the Centre for Teams to our series of webinars entitled Adapt. This, the second in the series, is entitled Slow Down to Speed Up. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, David Webster. David, we work with this concept quite often with teams. What's the reason that you think it is so relevant at this time?
Thanks, Chris. Yes, we do talk about slowing down to speed up quite a lot in our work with teams. This current circumstance is no exception. It's even more relevant, we think. You spoke in the first of this webinar series about this being a VUCA environment, one that is volatile, uncertain, highly complex, and very ambiguous. And the initial reaction of a leader and a team, very often in those kinds of circumstances, is to move to action very quickly. And that can be very comforting. It can be entirely appropriate, of course, as well. But the challenge for leaders and for teams is not just to react to those change in circumstances, which are quite profound for society as well as for organizations and, of course, the teams that lead them. Not just to react, but to respond in a considered way over time. If you think of a team in any normal circumstance as being quite complex and a composite of a whole variety of differences, they may have different objectives, certainly different experiences, different personalities at play, different assumptions about the way that the world is, perhaps different senses of priority, and different ways of solving problems. Then you put all of those differences together and surround it by a very changeable environment, and the opportunity for misalignment is huge. So if you think about the analogy of going across the Antarctic, a team where each team member takes a slightly different bearing on a map and then marches off at high speed, 2 or 3 miles down the track, each team member is going to be in a very different place. So the chances are that you're going to need to slow down long enough that you can all take a really good, clear view as to what you're all driving towards, get real alignment in order that you can make some good decisions and move forward together.
David, thank you. So I got the sense as you were talking, this very clear idea of the need to slow down, our natural proclivity to react, particularly under stressful circumstances, and that lovely analogy which just supported that sort of sense of a different heading on which each of us could go if we weren't really aligned, particularly for a team environment where cohesive action is so important. What else do we need to understand about this concept in order to really apply it well?
We talk a lot in our work, again, with teams, not just in this circumstance, but all the time, in supporting teams to truly adapt to their circumstances, about the learning cycle. And it's a concept that I think we're quite familiar with in many ways in organizations, and it happens automatically. And I'll just describe it here for you first off. We do stuff, then we reflect on the fact that we've just done something, just engaged in action. Then we might then make some connections between what we wanted and what we got, where we ultimately want to end up, the kind of resources that we'll need to get there. And then we move to deciding, making robust decisions about what we're going to do next. And that cycle continues automatically. And in a team, of course, it happens too, not just at an individual level. So if a team engages in public reflection as to what it's just been engaged in, it can then have a much better chance of creating shared meaning of things like purpose and goal set and agreements around behavior that are genuinely shared. And if that's the case, then there's a much greater chance of the planning activity that they then engage in being joint planning rather than individual planning. And those joint plans result in much more coordinated action. So if you see that the learning cycle happens both at an individual as well as a team level, then you have a much better chance of slowing down long enough that all of those areas are covered properly. And teams report to us that often they engage quite readily with the stuff on the left-hand side, that's doing and deciding, but much less activity on the right-hand side, where they're genuinely reflecting and making good connections in order to raise the quality of the problem solving and the decision making they engage in, and therefore the quality of the action that ultimately comes out the other end. So slowing down long enough that you do attend to each part of the cycle is a really helpful idea.
David, thank you. And very striking in terms of that, just that sense of where we can tend to predominate and work in terms of the doing and deciding, and just the need to actually spend time on the reflecting and connecting, particularly around getting that shared sense of meaning. Is there any sort of particular examples that you have that sort of brings this to life?
Yeah, a couple of examples from a team, actually 3 examples from teams that we worked with. One is where they were trying to get a number of different organizations together to work on a series of challenges that the organization as a whole was facing. And being able to arrive at a common purpose and a common goal set at a very simple level took them a huge leap forward. So they were super clear on the tasks that the team was there to engage with. And another recent example is where we're working with a high growth tech business, and the goals were relatively clear, but they wanted to be able to work together more effectively towards them, and getting alignment around the behaviors that they were all going to agree to engage in order to be able to deliver on the task was their opportunity. And both of them engaged in slowing down long enough to speed up over time. This took a series of conversations. It wasn't just one conversation. And they got into a rhythm that allowed them to make better quality decisions. And one example more recently that I stumbled across in the health sector was a leader telling me about the decisions they made on the kind of data that they needed in order to be able to make the fast-moving decisions that they were now required to make in this current circumstance in responding to the COVID situation, where they were quite used to engaging with the stock levels that they had, but they needed to know how long those stock levels were going to last for, so that they could then up the ante on the rapidity of the decisions that they were making, and therefore make good quality decisions as they went along much more rapidly. So those were some examples that we think are relevant here in slowing down to speed up.
David, thank you. And particularly relevant, that final example in terms of just creating some alignment around the data that people are looking at and the decisions they're making around them. As we come to a conclusion, what are your sort of final key takeaway messages?
I think in this current circumstance, perhaps we can tie it right back to the beginning. There's a huge push to do stuff, to get into the doing very quickly, and that is entirely relevant. But unless you can slow down periodically in a kind of rhythm, and we'll talk about this later on in the series, slow down long enough in order that you can up the ante in the quality of the decisions that you make and the quality of the problem solving that you engage in, the chances are you're not going to be able to move as quickly. So slowing down actually, paradoxically, allows you to move much more quickly in the longer term. So that's what we'd encourage you to do, to slow down in order to be able to speed up, and in that process get greater alignment and greater focus.
David, thank you so much. That concludes our webinar on the second of the series, and we will look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you.